an ironic media production.
Visit us at ironickmedia.com.
That's an incredible story. And that's got to be awesome, right? To have him in your life, someone else with CMT and that relationship with someone you can speak to and you speak every day. It's got to be great.
And also, you didn't have a role model growing up, and now he has you to look up to. And that is a huge gift.
We can't do anything about the past, so we both know that. And I wish I could have been there for him growing up. But I know that he says when we first met, he's like, I was glad to see you, that you were still on your own 2 feet and you were not in a wheelchair, because that makes him more encouraged. He may not deteriorate as quickly, which I hope, of course, that he's able to stay on his feet as long as possible, and me too. And it's uncanny how much we have in common. I mean, with how musical he is, the music that he likes, even though he's more into rock than hip hop, but we love so much of the same rock and classic rock. He named all the perfect bands when I asked him: Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin.
Ah, that's so great. Hello, everyone. This is Chris and Lizzo.
We are a brother and sister team.
On behalf of the Charcot-Marie Tooth Association, aka CMTA, we are coming at you.
Coming at you from coast to coast. I live in California and Chris is in Vermont.
This is another fantastic episode of our famous podcast named
CMT for Me.
That's right, CMT for Me, a comprehensive podcast covering all aspects of CMT, the voice of individuals living with CMT, their challenges, and more importantly, their inspirational stories. We will also cover research updates, fundraising, interviews with the CMTA community, board members, branch leaders, CMTA leaders, and overall, an opportunity to spread awareness through the eyes of those with CMT.
Well done, Chris. Thanks for the intro. So what's going on in Vermont? Are you doing anything fun?
Well, Lizzo, I was listening to some music over the weekend, and up came Mac Miller and Lil Wayne. I thought to myself, no problem. I can produce a rap tune. Want to hear what I came up with, Lizzo? Want to hear it?
A rap tune? Sure. Let it rip, Chris.
Okay, here we go, folks. Here we go. My first attempt. Walking down the street wearing my CMT. Why all these people staring and looking at me? I give them a wave and display a big smile. These CMT legs are going to walk 100 miles. Inspiration, motivation, courage floating through my head. I walk these 100 miles tired. Now I'm going to bed. Continue standing tall like the biggest redwood tree. CMT will never get the best of me. Yo. There you have it, Lizzo. What'd you think?
My gosh, it's so much better than I thought it would be. Maybe you should take up rap with Aron.
I can always count on you for being upfront and honest. What have you been up to, Lizzo?
I'm still laughing about that rap song. That was pretty good. For me, we saw Hamilton last night, and what a show. Wow, that cast did a fabulous job of telling the story using rap, hip hop, R&B, and it was fabulous. But, you know, since we're talking about rap today,
yeah,
you remember that video we all did? Gene and I did a video for the first ever Awareness Month. Do you remember that? You
know, I try to keep that out of my mind, Lizzo. I mean, it was pretty bad. I'm starting to cringe, but, you know, it was a good attempt.
Well, let me refresh your memory.
Oh, geez, here we go.
So now you see that CMT is not well known in the community. Charcot-Marie Tooth?
Huh?
What?
Give a shout out that CMT is not country music TV.
What? No Willie Nelson?
Let the world know that CMT is an inherited neuropathy.
Inherited neuropathy.
September is a time to get online.
It's up to us to put up a fuss.
Future generations are counting on us.
Us.
The CMTA is leading the way to keep this disease at bay.
We're working hard to make you aware, and we hope that you really care.
So put up a fight. Let's do this right. Let others know about our plight.
And to end this rhyme, we're asking you
one more time. Call a friend.
Tell your family.
Join our community.
Like us on Facebook.
Hand out brochures.
Teach your teacher. Go to www.cmtausa.org.
Oh my God. God, Lizzo, that's embarrassing.
And when I'm looking at the video, you're swaying your hips,
my
your arms
goodness.
are going back and forth. You are so into it.
Well, I'll tell you, between this rap and mine, pretty terrible. Hold on a minute. The votes are in. Number 1, sucks. 5, great. Looks like we got a 1. Oh, and actually someone gave us a -1, Lizzo.
Well, this upcoming guest is into music, and he's put out a couple of rap albums, a few of which talk about CMT. Hit it.
Hey, what's up? This is Aron, aka Ridiculous Beats. And they said, you're not like the other kids. You'll never be the same as them. And never was the same again. It got me focused and determined, set out on a mission just to do the best I can and doing everything I can to win. Neuromuscular disorder, wearing leg braces, knowing everybody will stare. Spit my paper out, don't want Jordan pose, I suppose, just in case I feel like super kipping in the air.
Oh, that is so cool. I can't wait to explore this more. I love the verse. You'll never be the same as them. I never was the same again. Can we continue, Lizzo? I want to know more. Who is this dude?
I'd like to introduce you to my longtime friend, Aron Taylor. Aron's been involved with the CMTA since like 2016. He came to a branch leader conference in Tampa. And since then, he's done a lot for the CMTA community. He's done fundraisers. He opened a branch with his mom. He rapped for our Giving Toast Day appeal. And now he's even involved with our youth for an upcoming dance-a-thon.
Pretty impressive. Hello, Aron. How's it going? Awesome to have you.
Hey, going well.
First question, though. What is Giving Toast Day anyways?
Well, I think that might have been Gina Sweeney's idea. And Giving Tuesday, I think, is just another fundraising event people do in, I think, December. So she had an idea, why not make it Giving Tuesday? So she hollered at me and asked if I could make a song, and we did last year.
Oh, and it was great. And the video was great and everything. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah. And Aron, what did you think of our rap songs, man? Be honest, dude. I mean, I heard you and I was like, oh my God, we are far from where we need to be.
I always have creative critique to give, but that was pretty well rehearsed and on point, I thought, guys. So,
oh, wow. All right. We heard it. We heard it from a pro, Lizzo. We do have a future. In preparation for your visit, Aron, too, we also learned some great new rap words, and then we'll get on to the interviewing. I learned this one. I got the dragon, and I found out that means bad breath.
And flossing, showing off by wearing fancy and expensive things. Did you know that one, Aron?
Yeah, and a new word. I'm not a young man anymore, but the word drip. Your drip is like your accessories, your jewelry, your style, whatever it is, your good look, your style. You got some nice drip on.
Oh, I love it. We got this, Lizzo. And I'll say to the rap world, be prepared because here we come.
So let's get to Aron.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Aron. Where you're from? What do you do now? How'd you get involved with the CMTA? Just an overview.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in southeast Kansas, but I've been living in the Kansas City area for, about 15 years or so now. Anywhere from in the city, which some people don't realize Kansas City is Missouri and Kansas. But yeah, so I've been involved, like you said, with the CMTA since about 2015, working at a law firm and technology and working on music, which utilizes a lot of technology. It's kind of just in some ways, a natural crossover with some of the skills that I use there.
Wow, that's cool.
So you're married, have kids?
Nope, not married. I do have a son who's 20 years old and have a girlfriend who has some great kids as well. So they're 7 and 11. So
okay,
nice.
Sounds like you're busy.
Yeah, exactly. And Aron, what type of CMT do you have? And can you recall when you started showing symptoms and what were those symptoms?
Going way back to second grade, which for me would have been in the mid 80s, my parents noticed that I was just running a little differently all of a sudden. And they took me to some appointments and specialists and things like that. And at the time, it was in some ways surprisingly diagnosed correctly as CMT because they didn't have all the genetic testing they have here today. So I just got my genetic testing, though, in 2019. So I know that I have 2A, but that's a newer revelation to me. I didn't know at all what type I had, or even for sure that I had it, because I'm a spontaneous mutation. Nobody else in my family, other than my son now, has it. So,
we hear that a lot, huh, Chris?
Yeah,
the spontaneous mutation. Yeah. So what were your challenges growing up, Aron? Like in early elementary school, like you said, you had a hard time running, but how did that show during school? And what did the other kids think?
Well, surprisingly to say, I was pretty athletic. I've heard quite a few, and there are still some CMTers that continue to be athletic, so it shouldn't be actually a huge surprise. But I have a brother and a father who both played Division I baseball, and I was actually a pretty good baseball player as well. So for the most part, throughout my youth, it just mostly exhibited itself with me kind of getting a little slower compared to the other kids over the years. So as other kids got faster, I just wasn't quite keeping up as much. Luckily, I had a good arm and could hit in baseball. I was able to do well and played all through high school. But compared to the other kids, I didn't run as fast. But I mean, at the time, I could run up and down stairs. I mean, I could jump. I mean, I used to think I was going to be able to dunk when I was in 8th grade because I could get all the way up to the top rung on the net, surprisingly. And I'm only 5'8". But I hit my growth spurt in 8th grade and hit 5'8" in 8th grade. So I thought for sure I'm going to be 6 feet. I'm going to be dunking at some point. But then it kind of started going downhill a little bit when I broke my foot my senior year. It wasn't really a bad break, but after that, just kind of some of my flexibility wasn't the same and I couldn't run without a lot of pain. So in my early 20s, I really just kind of stopped running and couldn't do stairs as well anymore. But I get along okay overall, though.
Yeah. And how did you break your foot?
My dad's house was about a block from the high school. So occasionally I would go run over to my dad's. My parents were divorced, so I would just kind of go to my dad's or stay at school or go home, either way. Yeah. But I ran over to dad's, grabbed a sandwich or something. And when I was running out the front door and running through the yard, there was just this slight dip in the ground. The yard wasn't completely level. And when I hit it, it was one of the first times I remember, if I can kind of relate it to other feelings I've had due to CMT, it was one of the first times I really felt like the trap door went out from under me, as I like to call it now. It wasn't really a big dip in the ground, but I just buckled when my foot hit it. And it was oddly mostly my knee, I think, that gave out, even though I don't really have knee trouble, right? Sure. So I landed, though, straight down in a squatting position with all my weight on that foot, and I heard a pop. It was actually a pretty minor fracture, but I still was off of it, 6 to 8 weeks, and I had to do the crutches and all that good stuff.
Right. And that was when? Did you say that was in high school?
Yeah, that was the fall of my senior year. Right. So luckily, it didn't interfere with baseball season other than my foot hurting. Didn't hurt as much before. But the funny thing was with the break, and I don't know if anybody else has ever had an injury that just makes you look back and say, oh, yeah. But I was able to, I have my hands on some old documents from my childhood, like grade school, when I was getting my initial diagnosis. And I have these doctor's notes that are describing the pain on the outer side of my right foot. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly where I broke my foot. So that was a weak point, and it makes sense now. I mean, that part of my foot always kind of had more pain than the rest of my feet or anything else.
So, Aron, one more thing I'm just thinking about as you spoke here, and if I got it right, when I asked about diagnosis or when you first experienced CMT, you said around 2nd grade, but then you actually didn't get tested until 2019. And as I'm doing my math, right, that's almost 30 plus years.
Also correct. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just trying to think of just what's that history like? You're participating, you're very active, you're in baseball. Sounds like you have high hopes. You've got mentors there playing baseball, your father, et cetera. Sports was really a part of your life. And at some point, you start comparing yourself against others. And eventually, even down the road, you decide you should really further look into this. And then I'm just thinking, why'd you wait so long? Or just what was the history behind that?
Yeah, I think the main thing is throughout most of my childhood, even though I had this problem, like many people with CMT, for the longest time, I would not wear shorts. I didn't like to show off my skinny legs. As I talk about in the music, I started middle school in a wheelchair. I was at school for a week or two and then had this major surgery on both of my feet. After that, my legs had atrophied even more than they were before. I mean, I could stand on my tiptoes before my surgery. I never could again ever since my surgery. And I think a lot of it, being young and frustrated and having been a guinea pig all throughout grade school, really, or having felt that way, wanting to just be normal and fit in. And looking back as an adult, dealing with what I now recognize as a lot of anxiety and social awkwardness or just self-esteem issues, even that I think you think is all just you when you're that young, but you start to realize it's all just part of the human condition, really, that we all deal with. But the struggle was real nonetheless at the time. So I was just trying to be normal through my teens and my 20s. And then into my, I guess it would be mid to late 30s at the time when I started working on what is the Heavenly Screams album, the most recent one that's available out there. I just kind of organically, not intentionally, was writing these lyrics about my CMT. never thought to write about it in the past. I was always writing other stuff, being a wise guy and tongue in cheek, trying to be cool with my music. But I started writing these lyrics that would become Life You Love, right? And it just kind of came to me as it's one thing to just have notes or lyrics on paper, but a song was actually coming together. And I was like, this is going to be cool. And I realized I couldn't just sit on it and just have this song out there and hoping maybe some kid with CMT would find it one day. Right. So that led to me eventually just saying, I need to go Google Charcot-Marie Tooth fundraiser or Charcot-Marie Tooth something or other. That led to me connecting with Gina Sweeney, of course. We became good friends over the course of like the year I was working on that album, and I would give her updates. I'm like, oh, I'm really close to having this song. And she was cool, super excited, made me feel good. Yeah, so that's really the ultimate crux for what got me involved. I was getting a little older. I have a pretty mild case, but I can't just not pay any attention to my health and my CMT. I need to start maybe looking into braces, maybe looking into going to the doctor again for the first time since the 80s, and then getting involved.
I remember you saying that you developed a lot of determination to do what you were told you couldn't do because the doctors, what they say, they're like, told you everything you could not do.
Yeah.
And what was your reaction to that?
Well, it's kind of weird. I don't know if it's just the luck of the draw or genetics or whatever, but ever since I was really young, I wanted to be a performer of some sort, although that doesn't mean I wanted to be like this big touring artist per se. I just liked being goofy, being musical or funny and whatnot. Let me pause right there because I'm doing a side story and I'm missing part of your question. So could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, I wanted to know because I know that you're very determined. When somebody tells you can't do something, you do it. You go and try to do it even better, right? And so we'll talk about the tongue twisters. But I also want to know what effect it had on you when doctors just said, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Bye.
That's it. Thank you for recapping that. Yeah. So I guess in a way, I always tried to and wanted to excel at things to begin with, just in general. When I'm going into the doctor's offices and being told as a kid who wanted to be a professional baseball player, actually, that was my number one goal initially.
It was,
being told that you'll never do this. And well, he'll be lucky to, I can't think of everything that they would say. He'll be lucky to do this and that. And here's what's going to happen to his body. I really just felt like, how do you know? You don't have a crystal ball here. You don't know the future for sure. And I really felt like, I don't know, you could call it bad bedside manner. I felt like, let's be realistic here with the kid in the room. Why be negative is kind of how I absorbed that information. And so instead of letting it just make me feel terrible, which I'm sure it probably did make me feel bad to some extent, but I use that as energy to push myself. I'm going to show people that even though I can't run fast, I can hit and I can throw. I mean, I was a pitcher. I will strike you out. It just made me very competitive overall.
I think how I would respond, I would walk away probably like being really down and negative. It's just so interesting and inspirational, Aron, to hear how you take that negativity and turn it into something positive, which is really sweet.
Probably the biggest reason for that is music. I mean, as a kid, and I even talk about in some of my music, I say, spending all my time in my bedroom as a kid, man, listening to music, analyzing every line, right? It's just, I can't even remember which song it is now, but it didn't matter. Rock, classic rock. Of course, in the early 80s, rock wasn't classic rock yet, right? It was about to be classic rock, but growing up on classic rock and hip hop and all of that, it was fuel for me. I would feel bad about whatever it was, oftentimes my physical condition to an extent, but I would get on my little pretend microphone in the bedroom by myself and just go to town for hours. I would beatbox, I would rap, I would sing. Yes, I can beatbox too. I think if it wasn't for music, I would probably have been a lot more negative person, to be honest with you.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, Aron, why don't you give us a little sample? The first time you rapped about CMT in a song, you did the Life You Love, and that was the first time it just kind of came out. And I don't think you really meant it to come out at first, and it did.
Right, exactly.
So give us some history.
Yeah, so it's pretty much straightforwardly autobiographical, I guess you would say. And I'll do it a little slower and then I'll wrap it. So hopefully It's easy enough to understand. But I say, when I was just a tyke, my mom saw me running in the street and something didn't look right. Having the time of my life, but she knew my emotions weren't what the other kids looked like. That's when the drama began. Thought I was a little man, but getting treated like a guinea pig. Feel another pinprick through my flesh, although I didn't let them know I was scared to death. Had a barrage of tests. They're taking blood samples, MRIs, and X-rays, and I'm covered with electrodes. I was only 8 years old, but I'm clearly understanding every single word I'm told. And then the part you guys know, they said, you're not like the other kids. You'll never be the same as them, right? So
Right.
let me put that together now.
All right, let's hear it.
Like when I was just a tyke, my mama saw me running in the street and something didn't look right. Having the time of my life, but she knew my emotions weren't what the other kids looked like. That's when the drama began. Thought I was a little man, but getting treated like a guinea pig. Feel another pinprick through my flesh. Although I didn't let them know, I was scared to death. Had a barrage of tests. Yeah, they take blood samples, MRIs, and X-rays, and I'm covered with electrodes. I was only 8 years old, but I'm clearly understanding every single word I'm told. They said, you're not like the other kids. You'll never be the same as them. I never was the same again. It got me focused and determined, set out on a mission just to do the best I can and doing everything I can to win. Now I'm in the 5th grade, neuromuscular disorder, wearing leg braces, knowing everybody will stare. Spent my paper route, don't want Jordan foes, I suppose, just in case I felt like super kipping in the air. Had corrective surgery in 89, and I went up, started middle school in a wheelchair, feeling isolated on an island. Took a pen and started writing, finding solace in my rhymes and feeling like nobody cared. So
yes,
woohoo! That is awesome. I mean, I don't know how you speak so fast.
Lots of practice.
I know Lizzo has some questions in terms of the meaning, but I just wanted to ask you, how'd you develop that skill for rap? It's very unique. I mean, I have a son, he's 23 and very into music. And I remember a time in the living room, he wrote some lyrics and rapped. And He was someone that could remember any song growing up. I mean, hear it once and then turn it into something different. And I still don't know how someone gets that skill. So What turned you on to this or moved you in that direction? How do you do it?
I think a lot of it is because for whatever reason, I'm one of these people who's largely driven by music. It just fills me up with energy, unlike other people who may not love music as much. People like music, they like to hear songs, but when I don't know if is it genetic, the roll of the dice. I'm just a musical person. When I was a kid, I was dancing around in the room to Michael Jackson. I had the glove and the socks, Michael Jackson, right? I would call myself like the human jukebox or something. Whatever I would hear, I would mimic it and learn it. And I would always feel like I can sound like that, or I can do that, right? Whatever it was. And then growing up early 80s, when hip hop was really starting to come into its own, I really loved the fact that rap wasn't as fast back then, but rappers would just keep rapping and seemingly never take a breath. So, for example, Rapper's Delight, that everyone knows I said a hip hop, the hip did a hip, a hip hip, a hoppy, you don't stop, and rock it to the bang bang boogie, say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogity beat. But that whole time, there's hardly any breathing at all, and the song just keeps going, right? There aren't any big pauses in there. I don't know. I saw it as a challenge. It sounded good to hear. It sounded good in my ears as well when I would sing along. So I immediately was pulled in by hip hop. But then also when it comes to the tongue twisters, right? As a child, I would hear the tongue twisters that other kids were doing. If you were the kid who came up to me and said, "Oh, I bet you can't say rubber baby buggy bumpers 5 times fast." "Oh, I bet you I can." And I would be like, rubber baby buggy bumpers, 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 rubber baby buggy bumpers. But how did I learn how to do that? I would sit at home and just say rubber baby. I would do it slow at first though, right? Rubber baby buggy bumpers, rubber baby buggy. And if that's too fast, I would slow it down a little bit more until I wouldn't mess up. And then I would just incrementally speed up. And in short, that's how I did it basically.
That's cool. Cause I know if I was given that challenge and I was given those various challenges, I just turned away and didn't even bother. I'm like, hey, I can't do it. I'm not going to spend the time to try to figure it out. Cause I know I just would totally get me down in the dumps.
And the life you love, it made me kind of sad listening to you rap, because when you're talking about needles and electrodes and you were getting nerve conduction studies, right? And it was probably painful. And you talked about other tests and exams in a very lyrical and musical way, but just makes me sad when you talk about it, but also to let people know that you are talking about the nerve conduction studies and other things.
Sure. In a way, I don't want you to be sad, but that's definitely part of the feeling that I wanted to share with people. Like, this is how I felt, was terrible. But on the other hand, it got me focused and determined, set out on a mission just to do the best I can and do everything I can to win, right? Just because you feel terrible, you can certainly double, triple, quadruple, and just infinitely fall into feeling terrible and reinforce that with all the negativity in the world. Or you can say, I'm going to take that negative feeling and try to do what I can to address it. Yeah, I can't grow new legs, but I can be good at things, right? I can do things and have skills that other people maybe don't have, or at least most people don't have. So
Well, I guess I was extremely sad for the child going through that, but really proud that you can put that into music and into words and relay that sentiment to other people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And that's, I'm glad. And I hope the kids out there that have heard that, and the parents even, you hate putting your kids through these type of tests and the pain and all of the feelings they're going through in that process. But you have to do it as a parent. As a kid, you may have to go through this. And even if it's not CMT, we all have to go through some pretty terrible struggles in our life. And that's just part of being alive.
Yeah. And that's a great perspective and way to look at it. And Aron, how old are you now?
I'll be 44 this month.
Right. So just thinking of the history of CMT, but what are your symptoms today? We talk to a lot of individuals that still feel pain or have discomfort. But what are your symptoms? What can you tell us?
I'm fortunate where I don't have a ton of chronic pain, although
Great.
I do get working in technology and I'm on a computer all the time. Most people are on a computer quite a bit. Let's be honest. Using a mouse and keyboard too much can really make my hands and wrists and forearms and like just make everything sore and tired and kind of tingly and things like that. But if I do stretches and exercises and take little breaks, it's definitely manageable. So that's not the worst thing. My hands and arms are decent. They're okay. And I have some decent upper body strength. I just don't have a great grip. Whereas with my legs, definitely just lacking strength. I used to be able to run up and down stairs. Well, I struggle on stairs now. Of course, going down, I prefer because I can just hold on tight and work my way down. But when I'm going up, I really have to pull with my arms quite a bit. In fact, I've been doing physical therapy this year because I developed some chronic shoulder issues. That's going well. I'm feeling encouraged. Just weakened legs, of course. But then when it comes to my feet specifically, lack of flexibility. I'll use my hand to explain to people more than my foot because it's just easier. I'll say, hey, you know how you can pull the tip of your toes way back and you could probably walk on your heels. That's a pretty common test. And I'll have my friend, yeah, okay, I can walk on my heels or bend my foot back really far. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. In fact, I'll just let you push on my foot. It's not moving, right? So it just kind of goes from here to here. It goes down, not up, I guess you would say. And then when they push on it, I'm like, push as hard as you can. I can't feel it. Like it's locked in place. It's not, nothing's going to happen, right? So because of the lack of flexibility, the more likelihood to stub my toe on something and stumble, the slightest change of elevation or hitting the lip of a sidewalk. And it doesn't even have to be a high sidewalk. It could be the tiniest from one piece of concrete to the other. And I'll stub my foot on there and trip, which of course is improved by wearing AFOs, wearing, leg braces doesn't happen nearly as much. So
what kind of leg braces do you wear, Aron?
Yeah, I wear TurboMed orthotics. And in fact, meeting all the people at the Branch Leader Conference back in 2016, that's where I first saw those. One of my friends, James Cuizon, I feel bad. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name, but James, our famous TurboMed guy and one of my good buddies, he had these braces on the outside of his. That night, particularly, he had his dress shoes on, right? And I'm like, wait, what are these things on the outside of your shoes? And he's like, oh, those are leg braces. And I was immediately intrigued because the only other time that I had worn braces was in 5th grade. I refused to wear them afterwards because they caused far more pain than they helped anything. They went in my shoes. They were uncomfortable. Hated them. So wearing the braces on the outside of my shoes, it's great. And I mean, as I mentioned in the music, I like to wear Jordan shoes, which are stylish anyway. So I get a lot of compliments about my shoes and people looking at my leg braces and they don't even necessarily realize. They're like, oh, those are some cool Jordans. Which version of those? Oh, those are leg braces on the outside. Right. And then we talk,
Right. So Aron, it sounds like you're very comfortable if someone asks you if they're looking at your legs or your braces, that you can respond openly in terms of what you have and speak freely about it.
Definitely. And it's a huge shift too, from just 5 to 6 years ago. Prior to that, in my 30s was really the first time I started. I had friends that knew I had CMT, but I would say, hey, if we go out somewhere like to a baseball game and we have a group of friends, I'm going to tell their friends that I've never met. If you see me struggling a little bit, I have a neuromuscular disorder, but that was mostly just so they would be prepared if I needed help. And I was old enough to realize I might need to ask for help a little bit, but I still didn't make a big deal about the CMT until more, like I said, my mid to later 30s. And just once I decided I needed to not only take better care of myself, but also share what I could with the community, then I became an advocate. It's like, yeah, I want to have these conversations with people. In fact, people used to laugh at me when I would fall. There were a few times at baseball games, I hit the ball and I'm running to first base and I fall. And there's some some grown adult in the stands laughing at me. You know what I mean? And I wanted to be able to advocate for people like that and speak out against bullies, which I've done for a long time anyway. But
no, that's fantastic. That's great. Lizzo had referenced, and I don't know the story, and Lizzo, maybe you can ask the question here, but there was something about the history of how you met your son. And I don't fully understand that.
Well, yeah, because I read in a recent CMTA report that Aron found his long lost son. And so I asked him about that. So, Aron, could you give us a short version of what that was like? I mean, that's incredible.
It's very hard to keep it short, but the basics of it. Going back, let's start from more the present. We were unable to be together at the time he was born due to extreme circumstances, but I knew that I might have a son out there and had hoped to find him one day, or that he might try to find me one day. And it turns out that even though I'm not from Kansas City, I've lived here long enough and made friends and acquaintances and so on. Even though this is still completely random, I had a good friend who's involved with a community organization in Kansas City, Kansas. And he asked me, hey, we have this kind of like a job fair for some young adults coming up at a local library. And would you be willing to come in and just talk about what you do in IT, do some mock interview questions and look at their resumes and things like that? So I was like, yeah, sure. I'd be more than happy to help out my friend. And I like helping friends and people, even with their resumes, help them get jobs and things like that. So I show up and there's a room. Basically, there's 10 young adults. They were all ranging, I would say, 17 to 18, 16 to 18. And there were 10 adults representing various companies, anywhere from local banks to hardware stores to technology, things like that. I made the rounds with all of the kids. I basically had talked to all of the young adults, I should say, that were there, except for this other kid who I saw walk through, and he wasn't sitting kind of in the round table. He was actually standing up at the conference room podium at this library, chatting with my friend Jess, right? So everyone's minding their own business. I'm talking to the kids. The young adults. As it is, you get older, everyone becomes kids. Sorry about that, young adults. But I make the rounds and I'm done talking to everybody. So I go up to the podium and I'm like, hey, what's going on, guys? And Jess says, oh, I'm just standing here talking to this fine young gentleman, which would be my son. I didn't know yet. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's cool. And pretty much immediately he asked me, my son asked me, and his name's Ethan Kyle. He has the same middle name as I do. He pretty quickly just asked me, oh, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, I work in technology at a law firm. And he's like, oh, that's cool. I do some IT work also. Oh, cool. That's really interesting. Pretty quickly, Jess made the connection because he had worked with Ethan for years in the organization that he worked for. And Jess was my friend. So he kind of just points out, I kind of noticed you guys might have a little something in common with your legs here. And I immediately was like, oh, yes, I have this neuromuscular disorder called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, the elevator speech kind of thing. Pretty much right away, Ethan just freaks out, like his face, you could tell, just lit up. And he's like, oh, my goodness. He's like, I've never met anyone with CMT before. Because, of course, he has CMT, right? And I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And I'm like, neither had I until I got involved with this organization just a few years ago. And I'm like, I'm a branch leader. We do a summer camp footprint. I'm a counselor. How old are you, by the way? And he's like, oh, I'm 18. I'll be 19 in January. And this was October of 2019. So he was pretty close to being 19. And I'm like, hey, let's chat. Maybe you could be a counselor at camp or whatever. We'll get you out to a meeting. Let me give you my info. So I go in my wallet to get my CMTA business cards because I do have, as a branch leader, I have some CMTA business cards and I didn't have any. But what I had was my music business cards, Ridiculous Beats, right? And even though, you kind of feel semi-unprofessional because that's not really what we were talking about.
Kind of like, don't give the CMTA card. You just give the Ridiculous Beats card.
Right. I'm like, hey, forget about that. Check out my music, man. Right. So I give him the card and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't have my CMTA cards, but that has my info on it. I do music as a hobby. And he says, oh, I do music as a hobby too.
My goodness.
Okay, cool. So we both have CMT. We both do music as a hobby. We're both in IT, right? And I mean, these are just coincidences up to that point. But I'm like, well, let me get your info and I'll shoot you a text or something. And we'll talk more after this event that we're here for, right? Which is something completely different. So I whip out my phone and, okay, let me get your name. And one step back, when I handed him the card, I was like, I'm Aron, by the way. And he goes, I'm Kyle. And that's when I said, oh, that's weird. My middle name is Kyle. Okay, weird. So when I start punching in his name into my phone, I'm like, okay, so your name is Kyle. And he's like, well, actually, my first name's Ethan, but I go by Kyle sometimes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because here's where everything started clicking in my brain. His mom actually did name him what we had talked about naming him, which is why he has my middle name. So when he said, my first name's Ethan, I already knew he went by Kyle. Ethan Kyle. I just looked at him and I said, what's your last name? And when he told me his last name, I just dropped my phone on this podium and threw my hands up in the air. And I'm like, this is my son.
No way.
to the whole
Wow.
conference room. We're not in the open library. So we had a moment. We hugged. Actually, I'm like, hey, can we hug? Or yes. We hugged.
That's so weird, right?
Yeah.
Gosh.
We stood there and talked for well over an hour. And this is 2 years ago, almost on the 18th of this month will be our 2-year anniversary. Yeah.
Awesome.
And we talk every single day. We're so close. So.
Oh, that's so awesome. I mean, what a gift, I would say, right? At that time, unknown. And it's so interesting as you keep talking, there's more and more in common. I mean, that's an incredible story. And that's got to be awesome, right? To have him in your life, someone else with CMT and that relationship with someone you can speak to and you speak every day. It's got to be great.
And also, you didn't have a role model growing up, and now he has you to look up to. And that is a huge gift.
We can't do anything about the past, so we both know that. And I wish I could have been there for him growing up. But I know that he says when we first met, he's like, I was glad to see you, that you were still on your own 2 feet and you were not in a wheelchair, because that makes him more encouraged. He may not deteriorate as quickly, which I hope, of course, that he's able to stay on his feet as long as possible, and me too. And it's uncanny how much we have in common. I mean, with how musical he is, the music that he likes, even though he's more into rock than hip hop, but we love so much of the same rock and classic rock. He named all the perfect bands when I asked him: Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin.
Ah, that's so great. Just thinking about rapping and CMT, how important is rapping in your life, and how does that relate to whether it's coping or just your expressions? And maybe you don't always speak about CMT, but is that really is that an outlet, another way for you to express yourself that you hope you can carry those words on to others? What's that connection there?
Yeah, definitely. It's very much an outlet for me, as I would look at any musician just like any other artist, really. You have creativity. You have, like a painter might constantly have visualizations and things that they want to put to a canvas. Even if it's not always organized, I constantly have music bouncing around in my head. And it again, it's very much like a fuel. It's something that, I can be walking down the street and some beat is going on, and it may be a song I love, or it may be a new beat that I want to go make, and I may forget all about it. I don't even make a song out of it. So it's almost like music is the soundtrack to my life. It absolutely motivates me to have some type of positive outlet. If I go months without doing music, or in some cases I've gone years where I haven't really been able to be productive with life being too busy, it almost always turns out that music is what was missing. I might be listening to music, but if I'm not creating music, I'm not getting that out there.
Aron, we're kind of coming to the end in this story. I feel like we could go on and on with
I know.
you. But
so great speaking with you.
Since we're talking about your rapping, I'd like you to maybe give us some rap. And I noticed the Super Gimpin version 2, or I don't know, V2, does that mean version 2?
Verse 2.
Verse 2. Okay.
Verse 2.
See, I don't even have the musical
That's right.
vocabulary down. But could you give us some of that?
Yeah, so the first verse of that song is just typical, just hip hop braggadocio. I'm just being a smart aleck, tough guy, whatever. But the second verse is definitely about my experiences. And I say, again, I'll do it slow first. It says, look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. Yeah, I got some chicken legs, but they come with eagle wings. Now look inside my eyes. It's a man with a cane. Can you ascertain a life where you are constantly in pain? Can you live inside a world where every single day you get bullied by a punk who thinks it's just a game, while you're sitting in your wheelchair waiting for the day you get back up on your feet? You just want to be the same. But I wouldn't go, okay, here's verse 2 for you. look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. Yeah, I got some chicken legs, but they come with eagle wings. Now look inside my eyes. It's a man with a cane. Can you ascertain a life where you are constantly in pain? Could you live inside a world where every single day you get bullied by a punk who thinks it's a game while you're sitting in your wheelchair waiting for the day you get back up on your feet? You just want to be the same. But I wouldn't go back in time and change the thing in my life. It put the drive inside my spirit. Taught me how to stand up straight and fight. To step up and speak my mind. Make sure everybody hears it. Apply the logic of a Vulcan and the power of the whole to all decisions. And I'm back on the ascension. Is the reinvention. Yeah, I'm living, but that's why they call it super given comprehension on a whole nother dimension. And then back to, they said, you're not like the other kids. You never be the same as them and never was the same again.
Right
awesome.
on.
Woo!
Right on.
Great, Aron. That
Sweet.
was awesome.
That is fantastic. I love it. So, Aron, in closing, really thank you for joining us in this podcast. And like Lizzo said, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours. Just really impressive. You got a great story. I just love everything about you. And what I think kind of in closing, also, I think about our Cycle for CMT event, and we have a silent auction. I'm like, you could be our next auctioneer next year. With Apply Your Rap to an auctioneer. It'd be sweet.
It's another side gig right there for you.
People have suggested that forever. Yes.
Just think about, what would you like to say to the CMT community, whether it's any advice or through your experiences? And a big part of our podcast is people sharing their stories. And what would you like to say, and what could people learn? And the floor is yours.
So I guess part of it, you could hear from my own story, trying too hard in some ways to be normal, or just whatever normal is. You realize at some point that really there is no normal. Everyone's different. Everyone is unique in their own way. If you get involved with the CMT community on whatever level that might be, stepping outside of your own household, you're going to find some awesome people out there. And I mean, tons of awesome people. And our community is just unbelievably supportive, encouraging. And not only that, but they need us and we need each other. You know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
Because of the way Life You Love came out organically, and I wanted to get that message across to some kids, because I actually just put one foot forward and did it. I've been, again, a camp counselor for 4 years now, and now probably hundreds of kids have heard these songs and growing. Just get involved and try not to be too clammed up in your own shell, I guess. Step on out and do something big.
Awesome. Awesome message.
Thank you so much, Aron. It was great having you on. And if one of our listeners want to hear more of your music or more about what you do, where do they go? Do you have a website? Do you have...
Sure. If you still use just regular websites, ridiculousbeats.com, I try to keep that updated. My music is on Spotify and all streaming platforms under Ridiculous Beats. The last album that has Life You Love and Super Gimpin' is called Heavenly Screams. And then also, if you're on social media like Instagram, I'm just Ridiculous Beats on Instagram. And you can find me on Facebook. I mean, I'm all over the place, so look out.
Now, are you working on a new album?
I am. I'm working on a new album right now. And I do mention some CMT stuff in it, but that's not really the focus of it. The focus of it is more, I'm like an alien coming from outer space to explore this strange world. Well, any strange world. And I come across Earth. There are some pros and cons of having found these Earthlings here. So it's a lot more analytical in some ways, but there'll be some fun songs, some chill songs, and loud songs too.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have a tentative release date for that album, Aron?
I wish I could say by the end of the year, but I'm thinking late this year, early next year. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, there you have it, folks. That's Aron Taylor. And let me tell you, inspirational individual, right? Just such a great message, an advocate for those with CMT, someone who took his energy and translated it into being a branch leader, camp footprint counselor, et cetera, et cetera. And we're proud to have you. I'm sure the entire CMT community, Aron, would like to say thank you if they could join us here today. So thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me.
Chris, before we sign off, let me read you an email I received from a listener from the podcast.
Yeah, cool. I love when we get feedback. You know?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I love the podcast with you, Chris, and Johan. Very professional. I think you guys could do a national radio show. Isn't that cool?
That is cool. And you know what? It's awesome feedback. Whoever wrote that. And if you're listening, I'm really glad people are enjoying the podcast, right? And there's so many people, Lizzo, in the community who are ultra talented and deserve to shine. So let's make this a goal and make it happen.
Deal.
So, hey, Lizzo, if someone wants to learn more about CMT, where would they go?
www.cmtausa.org.
You got it. As I've said before, it takes a lot of money to fund research in order to find a cure for CMT. If someone was so inclined to generously donate to our cause, how would they go about doing this?
So, Aron, I'd like you to say www.cmtausa.org 3 times fast.
www.cmtausa.org, www.cmtausa.org, www.cmtausa.org.
Yes.
Got
it.
That's awesome.
There we go.
It's hard, guys. Practice.
Totally.
All right. To our listeners, do you have a good story? Would you like to tell your story on our CMT for Me podcast? Write to us, info@cmtausa.org, and pitch your idea. We want to hear from you.
Okay, Lizzo, a quick sign-off rap. Hey, little sis, it's time to go.
To all our listeners, we hope you enjoyed the show.
Awesome. Way to go. So until next time, folks, adios.
Goodbye. Thank you.